Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I thought I'd do a little update today. I've got some minor developments recently. I got my first batch of author copies of my book, The Hand of Fate. Um, I checked them. There were a few mistakes, so I made some corrections. So those should be live from tomorrow. The PDF version on itch.io is already live, so you can download it if you like. And I think if you've already bought it, you should be able to download it for free. If not, just feel free to send me an email or a message on YouTube or whatever, and I'll send you a new one. No problem. But yeah, I don't know. I've had some thoughts and some developments recently, both around tarot and just about my life in general, because I've had some issues. I mean, overall, this year for me has been pretty strange. Like pretty intense. I had this relocation in January to February. And I've had to take some legal measures to be able to to be able to get the apartment and things like that, because the landlord was acting up and stuff like that. But all that stuff, has still been reverberating, and there's still stuff going on in the background that I'm still dealing with, both financially and legally, and with a bunch of other stuff. And I've been trying, especially the last month, trying to make sense of all that. And in that all happened in combination with my dabbling in tarot, and with my what I perceive to be my spiritual path, and I think I finally had a breakthrough recently. So what happened, because it's not just the home, it's also stuff at work. I started a new job in February, which was not so, it started out well, but then it quickly went downhill, because there were just way too many difficulties, way too many calls, and the company I'm working for is way too disorganized and is unable to make heads or tails of how we're supposed to handle the situation and stuff like that. And the procedures keep changing here and there, and it was one big mess, basically. And then they decided to give me the opportunity to join a B2B team rather than customer service. So I was skeptical, but I took the chance. But there were a few caveats where they said, yeah, you'll have to do the training at the office, and then the nesting period, so all around about a month in the office and things like that, even though we had a contract for working from home and stuff like that. And so I went along with it. I did the training, I did the nesting period, and even that, even during the training, they actually didn't really know what they were supposed to be doing. So most of the training was a waste of time. And then the nesting period was even worse, because even though, we had these language groups, right? And I'm in the Dutch group, but every group had their own manager. And so those were appointed by the client company to coach us and to tell us what we're supposed to be doing. But so every group had different procedures to follow. And it turned out, but not every how do you say, not every language group was equally well equipped or prepared to actually do that. And especially the German team, for example, had the most difficulties kind of making sense of what they're supposed to be doing, especially because they're handling three countries, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Well, which is funny because my group, we handle the Benelux, so we also handle three countries, right? But we only have one manager, while they had three. So they were constantly disagreeing with each other, and then they were, at some point they thought they were ready, and then they canceled everything and they started all over again. Well, we were already basically just doing our jobs and making sales and stuff like that. So, but then for some reason now the company decided that we need to go back to the office again, even though we had already transitioned back home and stuff like that. And I had a disagreement with them, and that was recent. So that was like this week or last week. I've been in the business for so long that I don't really care anymore what they think of me or what they. So I just voiced my opinions, and I just told them, we haven't signed for anything. That wasn't the agreement. So unless you give us like a new contract, I see no reason to come to the office, right? And all they could say was, yeah, but this is compliant with our policies, and this is a business decision, and stuff. So, just buzzwords that don't actually mean anything, and there's no attempt to give us a reason. They couldn't even tell us for how long we're supposed to go back to the office and stuff like that. I even contacted my my ACM to complain about this, and she told me the same thing. So I was like, I don't care. I don't care what you think. I'm just gonna stay home and I'm gonna log in from home. I'm already doing my job. I'm well equipped to do it. So if and if you don't like it, go ahead and I didn't say it, but that's basically what I said. I mean, I did say it, but not to her. I said it to like one of the supervisors or whatever. Go ahead and fire me. I can find a different job, like at the drop of a hat. In this market that I'm working in now, they're constantly looking for people with my skills, with my language skills and stuff like that. So, and I have years and years and years of experience at this point, right? And so just to, but I was still frustrated with this whole idea, and at the same time, the reason why I was so reluctant to go back to the office, I have a bunch of stuff to deal with at home because we have a leakage on top of our toilet or our bathroom, and the boiler is broken, so we haven't been able to use any warm water during the whole summer. Obviously it's summer, so we don't really care about that, but we still need to fix it because the summer is ending now. It's getting the temperature's dropping already. And then we got a power bill that was like 350 euros all of a sudden, and I was like, how, and I have to pay rent another 560. So that would be my whole salary if I paid those now. So I it took me a couple of weeks to kind of let that all sink in and kind of formulate a plan for myself. And obviously that was and all this stuff going on for me is like, because I tend to I tend to overthink, and that's why I'm drawn to the tarot and stuff like that as well. But so today, I was like, I was browsing on Facebook. I was just basically scrolling a bit, and I found this ad for a new job for like a job advisor, which was part-time, so that was 6 hours, and it was work from anywhere. So I could basically, they'd send me a laptop and I could go anywhere I want. I could go outside of Greece as well and just continue working from there. And I could schedule my own you know, my own schedule, plan my own schedule, stuff like that. So I basically applied for that. I updated my CV, also with my latest job experience and stuff like that. I added my publications as well, my books that I've written at the end, just so as an extra, just to let people know that I'm a creative kind of guy, and I'm very, I have a multifaceted background and stuff like that. And that already, just to have that backup, just in case they decide to fire me, or just in case that escalates, I can just say, you know I have no, I'm not. They were saying, yeah, you're not compliant if you don't come to the office. I'm like, yeah, okay, but I'm not planning to comply with irrational, or like, how do you say, well, with stupidity. There's no plan behind it. So what? Who's telling me I'm even going to transition back home anyway? Stuff like that. So I have a backup plan. I could apply for more jobs, but I'm not that desperate right now. So if it happens, it happens. But this one was a particularly attractive opportunity, because they have like pretty major bonuses. So the base salary is lower, but they have pretty big bonuses for like people, because you're basically informing like potential employees for these companies about what job they're gonna do, and I've been through all these projects, so I know exactly what to tell them. It's the easiest thing in the world for me. So if I can make, like, rather than 1,000 euros per month, I can make like 2,000 on average, that would already be like a massive improvement. So that's one thing. And then I called my lawyer, and we wrote a letter to the energy company to complain about that stuff. And I had already yesterday called like the plumber to discuss fixing the boiler and stuff like that. And he was like, okay, just call me next week, because now is vacation. Now it's a holiday in Greece. So call me next week, because now all the shops are closed, and I'll be able to help you. So things are kind of coming together, and I was like, I had a much better, already just taking the first steps to actually fix those issues helped a lot to just kind of calm me down and ground my feelings and stuff like that. So, and after I did all that, today I decided to lay some cards, and it's a pretty interesting thought. I could show you what cards I drew, because I usually keep the when I do spread for the day, I usually keep them in order until the next day. So I could show you. I started with this one, with the Thought Tarot, for example, and I drew these three, right, for with regards to the new job. And I think the interpretation is really, really clear, very simple. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm taking the job, but you can tell already that it was a good initiative. Right, so you have the Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords is like a new plan, or a stratagem. That's how I usually interpret it. So I had a backup, I have leverage, let's say. And then lust, in this case, is an interesting card, because in Dutch, when we say lust, it's like, how do you say? It's appetite, but the way I interpret this is like, I'm doing what I please. I'm freeing myself to be able to do what I want, you know. So I can now afford to stay home because I have a backup plan, you know. And then the 4 of coins or 4 of discs in this case is basically how do you say? You know, it's stability. Usually, it's financial stability or like how do you say? Work stability and things like that. But for me, it's like this peace of mind right now, you know, because it has to do with financial matters. It has to do with domestic matters and stuff like that. So that was one spread. That was the first one I did today, and I also decided to, you know, I watched Tarot Logic's video about coffee and tarot. So I decided to start doing that ritual, you know, because like coffee, you know, it keeps you alert and it maximizes your pattern recognition and stuff like that, and just kind of trying to use both tarot and coffee mindfully, you know, and just kind of get into a particular mindset when I'm reading the cards. And you know, so this result was pretty interesting. And then after I wrote the letter to the energy company, I did 2 spreads. So I started with the Spanish tarot, which I like to use from time to time because it just, I don't know, for some reason it just seems to work for me. And I got these cards, so I'm putting them in reverse order now because that's how, you know. So it was three of swords, 3 of wands, 7 of wands, and the Emperor. So again, you know, it's a very, and you know, usually I pull like 3 cards. And then when I feel like I could maybe use a little bit more information, I draw like a 4th. And you see kind of the same pattern again, because you have the 4, it ends on a 4, like the previous one, the 4 of discs, right? But here it's the Emperor. But you also have, so you have 2 3s, and then if you add 3 and 4, you get a 7. So they are all kind of, you know, I view these 2 cards as kind of the same thing. You know, this is like the mental anguish and like the how do you say, the anxiety that's transforming into the 3 of wands, that's being how do you say, transmuted into strength. And then the 7 of wands is like engaging and, you know, how do you say, applying that energy to a certain goal in this case. And then for the Emperor again is like resting in your own confidence, you know, being able to center yourself, you know, in this spread, obviously. So it's all context dependent, right? And then lastly, I drew. It's not the last, by the way. It's but the last spread I'm not gonna show today. And then lastly, I drew some playing cards, because I like to practice with those as well. And I got the same, well, not the same, but a similar result, you know. It's pretty funny how that worked out. So I got the here. So I drew 4 cards. Right, so I drew these 3. And here we got the 7 of diamonds. We got in reverse. So again, this kind of speaks of like financial trouble and things like that. The 7 of diamonds, I'm already inclined to kind of interpret it that way. So in the thought tarot, the 7 of coins is, or the 7 of discs is futility. Or wait, no, that's the 7 of swords. I don't remember, but yeah, you get what I mean, right? So the 7 of diamonds is financial trouble. The 3 of clubs is the same as the 3 of wands in the previous spread. So kind of center, you know, kind of how do you say it? Reintegrating these worries like as strength. And then the 4 of hearts kind of speaks of the same thing, but here it's more like emotional stability rather than financial, you know. But it's again, it's the same thing. That's kind of that was kind of the feel of the day for me. And then the Jack of Diamonds, you know, I kind of tend to interpret it the same way as the Emperor in the previous spread, because the diamond is a square, you know, it's got four corners, so again you have the four, and again you have the 7 and the 3 and the 4, right? So 3 plus 4 is 7, so you kind of deconstruct your worries and you take it step by step, right? And then the Jack of Diamonds is just kind of centering yourself again, you know. So, and it's what the reason why I'm telling this is, you know, I had like a realization, you know, because I was like, because this is a tendency I tend to do in general, you know, and I kind of grew up that way because I'm the oldest brother in my family, the oldest son, the firstborn son, and I have a kind of way to negotiate my situation, you know. So when I was a kid, that was how I negotiated my position with my parents, things like that. When I wanted to get my way, or when I wanted to get something I wanted, or when I was always trying to be proactive in getting what I want, right? So if I knew that my parents would reward me for doing certain things, so I would try to gain their favor by doing things, right? By doing the chores, by taking care of my little brothers, by stuff like that. And that's kind of how I've always approached life, and not only that, that's how I've approached like my own psychology, right? So if I want to do something I enjoy, you know, play a game or watch a movie, I don't know, you know, it depends on the time because I'm not always interested in doing the same things, but I always try to do it as a reward to myself. So I try to get all the stuff I have to do during the day, I try to get it out of the way as soon as possible, and then so I can then relax, you know. So I always view these things as a reward rather than as something I'm entitled to, you know. And it's funny because I've started doing the same thing with tarot now, and with and also with things like AI and stuff like that, because, you know, from time to time I do like to use an AI chatbot, but I use, like, for example, the one I've been using the most lately is Kundli GPT, which is like Ayurvedic astrology chatbot, which gives you like 8 questions per day. But it doesn't remember, you know, it doesn't have a history. So every day you have to start from scratch. It's like it's forgotten everything you've said the previous day. So for me, that's kind of like, it's kind of like a middle ground, or like a compromise, to not use a full AI chatbot, because I actually don't really like the idea of using them, but I do like the idea of getting this confirmation, being able to discuss certain ideas. And it's the same with the tarot, you know. The tarot could be, you could view it, and I kind of got into that in my last video on the history of tarot. You know, I kind of view it as like a companion. I don't view it like a magical tool or something that will tell me like the secrets of the future or whatever. I view it more like something that's going to help me to confirm which actions so I use it reflectively, right? So when that's what I'm trying to get at. So when I've done something, afterwards I try to discuss it, because I don't have many friends to talk with, and I don't have friends that, you know, or at least that's the way I feel, you know. I'm a bit of a loner. I don't go outside a lot and stuff like that, so I like to use these things to reflect for myself, to get some feedback either way. And so, I discuss or I reflect these thoughts and feelings and actions through these tools. So I use them after the fact. That's kind of how I view it, and that's helped me a lot. I try not to use it to, like, I don't know, predict the future or whatever. But I still, it still happens. When I'm feeling uncertain or when I'm having difficulties, I still tend to look at the cards to see if they have any feedback and stuff like that. But I do feel like approaching it this way, approaching it like a tool for reflection, for contemplation, rather than a tool for fortune telling and stuff like that, is the best way to go about it when I'm reading for myself. When I'm doing readings for others, it's a different story, because as long as I have a clear question, right? As long as I have a clear direction they want to go in with the reading. But the problem, like when I'm reading for myself, is that I'm actually pretty bad at formulating questions, right? Because for some reason, and I've always been that way. It's pretty ironic actually, because I graduated in philosophy, and it's all my professors and stuff like that were like, you need to be able to formulate your thesis, to formulate a question, to formulate to give yourself a direction, and that's just something I could never do. I don't know why. It's just I think I've gotten better at it recently, but I just kind of feel like I've always had the answers somehow, and I've always, that certain things are just kind of obvious, and I shouldn't be, I don't understand why people are asking those questions and stuff like that. And that's just kind of how I've approached the tarot as well. I do stand by what I said, right? That the tarot is like a philosophical engine more than anything else. It's not actually meant to tell you about the future and stuff like that. But I do view myself as a man of action rather than a man of contemplation, right? So Vita Activa over Vita Contemplativa. And I'm Aristotelian like that. I think Aristotle was the same way, because he was also like, the highest value is action. It's not theory. The only way to test your ideas is through putting them to action, right? Testing them against reality. And I honestly think that's what the tarot is about in the end. I don't. How do you say? I don't want to put it into opposition with contemplation, right? But contemplation is always a reflection. It's always something that comes on top. I had another thought about it as well, because I recently did my human design test, which is funny because that's my friend Raphael brought it up during my appearance on the Team Rabbit Hole hashtag Team Rabbit Hole podcast or live stream or whatever back in last month. So according to the human design thing, which I still don't fully understand, I'm supposed to be a manifestor engine, something like that. Which is funny because obviously my handle on YouTube and on everything on the internet is Manifestophiles, right? And there's a reason I chose that name as well, because that's just, it's the encapsulation of my philosophy. I do believe in manifestation in that sense, but I have my own thoughts about it, you know. And the human design chart says that my main mode, let's say modus operandi, you know, my MO is basically reaction, right? Reacting to things, and based on that, manifesting things and stuff like that. And obviously that is true. Because, for example, you know, I started playing Balatro. Uh, I started playing Balatro, and I came up with the idea for my Hand of Fate tarot system, for example, right? Or I I decided to move house. I got this apartment. Stuff went wrong, but I reacted, and I acted in time. I employed my lawyer and got things done and stuff like that. And it's the same with, you know, with the job, for example. Like, the potential exists for me to you know, to how do you say, not be able to count on having this job. So I took action and applied for a new job, just in case, to have that option, stuff like that. But I also think, you know, I do think you can react to subtler things than just, you know, you don't have to react to external things, right? If you're a you know. So I tried to invert that principle. I'm able to react to, like, thoughts I've had in my dreams, or like to a card that appeared in my spread, or to an idea, you know, I see on YouTube or stuff like that, you know. And the same and you can still get the same results as long as you have something that gives you that input, you know. So who isn't a reactor in the end? A how do you say, manifestation engine, or manifestor engine, or whatever. So it doesn't really matter to me. But what I'm trying to say is that I think so my realization, right, was about action. And I think what because I've always been wondering, you know, there's a lot of talk in, like, spiritual circles and stuff like that about initiation this and initiation that and stuff like that. And I could never really get it, because usually they say, yeah, it's some sort of ritual and then you have to go through it and stuff like that. And I've had my own moments where I'm like, where I feel, you know, last year I've talked about it on live stream as well. I don't know if it still exists out there, but, you know, I've had my own experiences that I would describe as initiatory, you know. But at the same time, I think the simplest way to put it is just initiative, right? You take initiative and you start something. And it's the same with the book, right? So I wrote the book. I got an author's copy. I check it out. The moment I have the physical copy in hand, I start seeing my spelling errors and my mistakes. So I go online and I fix those. Right? So you have this meme, for example, like make it exist. You can make it good later, you know? Make it exist first. You can fix it later. So something like that. So, and, you know, I wrote this letter to the power company today, and I was like, you know, there were a bunch of spelling errors and stuff like that, and I was like, I don't like that kind of stuff, because I'm a Virgo, obviously, you know, so I'm a perfectionist. But then at the same time, when I'm doing something serious, even though, you know, I went through the letter twice or three times with my lawyer, and I still got errors, which kind of pissed me off. But at the same time, I think it's not a bad thing, because it shows the urgency of the situation. So you're kind of expressing, you know, you're expressing your worry, which might be picked up by someone who's sympathetic to that and who will try to help you, you know, things like that. So I'll have to wait and see. I don't know the results just yet, but you know, it's just, you can't not do something, you know. So the first thing you need to do is to take action to make things happen, to put things in motion, and the cards are there to make sense of what you're doing, because we don't always understand what we do ourselves, you know. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. So my belief, and that's funny too, because I think for me that touches upon what I tried to get at with my previous video on the secret history of tarot and stuff like that. That the tarot is a tool, but it's like that's why I brought it. I tried to associate it with chivalry and with the warrior spirit, with Ghibellines, with and you have the knights in the tarot, you have the emperor, you have the magician, you have these archetypes that are active archetypes, you know. And I believe, because for example, I was also watching like videos about testimonies, born again Christian testimonies from different ministries and stuff like that, about how the tarot is demonic and stuff like that, which I don't believe. But I also don't believe, I get where they're coming from though. And the tarot, it's a double-edged sword. That's how I view it. You have to be responsible with it. It's literally like you can cut yourself with it, especially if you get like fancy ideas about yourself. If you think it's predicting the future for you, and I mean it's not that it can't predict the future, but you have to consider your own role in all that. And that's why I was, for example, in my previous video on the tarot delusion, that you have to be mindful of how does it influence me, how am I being manipulated by these symbols and stuff like that. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to have the answer ready, to center yourself. If you've taken action already and you know what the plan is now, and then you spread the cards to clear things up, then you're already locked in, to use a modern phrase. So you reduce the chances of it misleading you, right? Because it's now reflecting what you already know, and maybe offering some additional insights that you may not have seen yet. Things like that. Oh, and now, just to close this, I will show the last spread that I did for today, because that has to do with this whole thing. After this realization, I drew these 3 cards, right? And this is the Tarot de Marseille Millennium Edition. Still one of my favorite decks. Right, and you get the moon. The moon speaks of uncertainty, of processing things, processing information, the subconscious, things like that. The Ace of Cups, to me, in this reading, reflected this new idea of combining my coffee ritual with tarot. And the Two of Cups, could be an extension of that idea. I could, for example, I was thinking, for example, maybe I should do offer like tarot readings over a cup of coffee, and I could have someone over at my home, brew them a cup of coffee, first drink some coffee, have some discussions, and then after about half an hour, when the caffeine kicks in, we do the tarot reading, so that we're both in in a particular mindset. Obviously, I don't know if I'm gonna be, if I'm gonna try to make a business out of this. But that was just something I thought of, It might mean something else. It might mean like my relationship with the tarot that's deepening now and stuff like that. So who knows? I take this to be like a thing that I still need to discover. But also, I do feel like my mood had improved today. You know, for example, I recently discovered this weekend. I discovered I discovered a Facebook group. Wait, I could show you even. Let me see if I can find it. First, let's see, where do I have the browser? Here you go. Here. Right, so you've got groupe traduit en français sans aucun crédit. So it's like a meme group. It's like a meme group for translating like media, whatever, like from English into French, but like taking you know, English terminology and making it as obvious as possible, you know, translating it as literally as possible, right? So I even made my own meme. I don't speak French, you know, but I speak a little bit. But so I made like homme de guerre, man of war, you know, grêle à l'Angleterre, which is hail to England, but like hail as in a hailstorm, you know, hail to England. You know, stuff like that, and it's actually catching on, you know. So, and it's just so fucking funny. And I was like, this is the language of the birds in meme format, and I can just kind of go ham on like whatever stuff, and everyone's going ham. Like they're posting like hundreds of memes per day, and it's like, you know, it's so, and it's just this thing, you know. I just felt like, you know, I'm suddenly getting in touch, you know, just releasing all this negativity now, and it's I do get where, you know, I obviously I know why that was there, why that needed to happen, but at the same time I think being able to play with these ideas and start developing a playful problem solving mind. And it's funny too, because like I wrote my book about the Hand of Fate, you know, for that purpose, you know, to play with the tarot, to kind of break free from these restraints that we put upon ourselves when we read the tarot. But at the same time, I don't feel the need to use it all the time, you know. So when I want a clear reading, I'm just gonna draw 3 cards. Yeah, I used to do like Celtic crosses and I don't know, relationship spreads and you know, whatever. Or like these tableaus, like 3x3s or 4x4s and stuff like that. But I mean, 3 cards are plenty, you know. There's no need to go, you know, any more complicated than that. But at the same time, having this poker method is like, it's especially if you don't have a question, it's an interesting way to just kind of focus on finding these patterns, on recognizing these patterns, and see what they could mean and things like that. And I'm even thinking about expanding on this idea. So, you know, I've had some ideas about making it a 2-player game, so you can play like a poker like card battler with 2 decks, right? Every player has his own deck, and you're trying, you know, you draw a 7 cards, you try to figure out the best hand. And then, depending on the hand, maybe you deal X points of damage to your opponent or something like that, or whatever. But yeah, that's that's for another day. I might, you know, when I have the time, or when I get into that mindset, I might do that someday. But you know, those were ideas that were just floating around in my mind, stuff like that, or a tarot roguelike. You know, because those exist on itch.io as well for playing cards. You have these games where you draw 4 cards, and 1 card is a weapon, another is a monster, another is a healing potion or whatever, stuff like that. You know, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of stuff you can do with the tarot. It just doesn't have to be so serious, you know. But at the same time, having this, you know, like a safety net, especially if you're dealing with difficulties, can be helpful. You know, there's nothing. I don't see anything wrong with drawing a few cards here and there. It's just, it's just images that just kind of reflect your ideas back at you. So anyway, those were my thoughts for today. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I hope this was helpful. I don't know. Maybe I should do more of these videos. I kind of enjoyed this. I just kind of, because I have trouble journaling and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons why I use AI, because I know that they don't actually offer anything. They just confirm your ideas. Again, just like the tarot, they just throw it back at you. But it's a way for me to write it down, because otherwise I wouldn't do it. So for example, I use Kundalini GPT to analyze my dreams, right? So rather than have a dream journal, I do it this way, because that way I can fool myself into actually writing it down, stuff like that. So yeah, just stuff to think about. So yeah, hope that was enjoyable in some way. And I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully, I have some ideas for my next couple of videos, but I'll keep them to myself for now. So yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.